I've been wanting to make this video for a while about how religious organizations are made to pretty much make people not believe in God. I already have videos where I talk about how religion is a new world order, more so at like the beginning of the channel, which is not even titled that. It's titled I don't know if you're in the beast religion. And I know if anybody watches this, people are gonna get offended no matter what, especially religious people. But also the whole term "I'm not religious" is like, now it's just popular. It's just like the term narcissist, so everybody's saying it, but a lot of the people that are saying it very much are, and they're very much held down by false doctrines and Freemason, Luciferian, and occultic foundations, and just stuff that people made up off the top of their head. But before I even get into the main part, I want to talk about how, like, I don't even know how to break it down, but like, if you do believe in the Bible, then it's really hard to find anywhere to really talk about true biblical stuff, and not like the weird religious doctrines and the flipped around European stuff, or the flipped around Boule, Prince Hall, quote unquote black Freemason bullcrap. It's hard to like really find an outlet, or not even outlet, a group where you can really talk about like true biblical stuff. And of course everybody's always going to have their own opinions, and there's always going to be that, but it's not even really, it's not even religious. It's not even that. It's literally just the fact that there's just so much brainwashing with all these different religious organizations and sects and denominations. And it's like, people aren't on one accord. Which, that's why the whole sifting from the weeds has to happen. For Christ to come back for a bride without spots and blemishes. Because, for one, the people under the Christian label, not all of them obviously, but like, obviously I mean like mainstream Christianity. And of course, when I say that, I also mean like people in pagan Roman Catholicism, the Mormons, the Jehovah's Witness, and all those other sects that people usually don't even, or at least I would even say that people don't usually think of, that people that are like non-denominational Christians don't even think about when they hear the term Christian. They don't even think about the Mormon cult or Jehovah's Witness or those other organizations that I can't remember. They definitely don't think about Catholics. And it's actually kind of interesting because some Catholics think they're Christians, but most Christians know that Catholicism is false. And at least for AAs, or quote unquote African Americans, we're not Catholics anyway, so we already know the stuff that they have going on there is false. But, well, I can't even just say that. There's also just a difference between the churches. There's definitely a quote unquote white church and a quote unquote black church. And just due to the foundations, the bullcrap foundations in both, there's falsehoods in both of them. Now I can get to the point that I really wanted to get to, though. So it's like there's different quote-unquote Christian groups online, or whatever you want to call them, but they're rooted in so much falsehood, you can't actually talk about any real biblical things because everybody will get offended and they'll be like, no, that's not true. And I'm not even talking about the real history of like who's the people, which of course anybody that won't come to grips with that truth, they're gonna run after Caesar Borgia and the different false guys that are gonna be coming back. But not even like something like that, just like minor things. Like I've literally seen in Christian groups where people will be like, oh, I'm a gay Christian, or they'll be like, I'm gay, and or I don't know, cheating on my wife, stuff like that. And people will be like, God is love, and if God doesn't love you for who you are, and don't worry about it, kiddo, and it's gonna, and stuff like that. It's like religion is just so false, and they're for everything that the Most High is against. And it's like, you can't even talk about real biblical things or issues you have going on, because somebody's quick to come and play devil's advocate, literally. Like, I seen a situation like that earlier where some teenager was like, I'm gay, something, 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 I'm a Christian, something, 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 something. And of course I said, well, for one, you shouldn't hate yourself because that's what the demons want. You also have to know that it's not you. And usually this comes from trauma. It doesn't even have to be sexual trauma, just family dysfunction in general, but you could be born that way due to like generational trauma or generational curses or trauma in the womb. But they were also Catholic. And whenever you're in these false religious organizations, you pick up so many different spirits. That's why you'll notice that, like, not trying to be rude, but if you've ever been, I have to say, if you've been on Instagram and you somewhere from age like, I don't know, 9 to 11, you post a picture of yourself, the first person that inboxes you on some crazy mess is some dude in Hinduism or Buddhism. And it's the same way for like Catholicism, even for mainstream Christianity, and of course for Freemasonry, which that is Catholicism, that's a branch of Catholicism. They always have these perversion spirits on them, especially when it comes to being attracted to people that are way too young for them. And so that could also be how he picked up the spirit. And yeah, so I did say that, but the comment's probably going to get banned. But I mean, something I've always made clear though is that Reddit is definitely an app for white supremacists and child molesters. And when I say that, I don't mean conservatives, I mean left and right, because it's both the same thing anyways. Although obviously Reddit is a mostly leftist app just because of like the philosophies that they push on there. Not because people on the right aren't into the same bullcrap, but because they pretend not to be. Now I can go into the main point. So, there's a YouTuber, what's her channel called? Nubian Divine, I think that's what it's called. And she's one of the people that I've seen mention a lot the religious organization's treatment towards homeless people, and even homeless youth, they're homeless kids. And there's so much I could say about this. I've even, like, throughout my time since escaping the Cash for Kids system, and even just like traveling and going different places, I've noticed that, especially due to like racial stuff and homeless hate, or people thinking you're homeless supposedly, or at least that's the excuse, they'll treat you like crap. And I've noticed that, like, due to those two things, you can barely even get into some of these religious organizations to even use the bathroom without them threatening to call the police on you and things like that. Like, I remember when I was on the West Coast, I was walking to the park, but I really had to use the bathroom. And so this church nearby, they were doing this Catholic church, they were giving out food, because of course they do it because they get funding for it, and taxes, 501c3, different things like that. So they were giving out food, and I was like, okay, so they're open. And usually they lie and say they don't have a bathroom, because I had been before, because at this point in time I was still homeless. And I was laying low, and there wasn't really anywhere else for me to really get food, which I'm not going to go into all of that, but anywho. So, usually they say they don't have a bathroom, which obviously is bullcrap. And this one dude, he let me use the bathroom, and let me tell you, they cursed him out. They told him to hurry up and get me out the bathroom. They were threatening to come in there and get me out. And unfortunately, I have to pee all the time. So, like, when I'm out and about, I've been in a couple situations like this where I was like getting jail threats that people like, just so many threats, especially back then. And it's just like, it's not even about the homeless thing or somebody supposedly being homeless, because a lot of times in racial situations they will try to say, oh, I think you're homeless, and the person's not even homeless. They just have that excuse as to why they don't let the person use the bathroom, or they don't want the person to come in. And mainly Catholic churches do this. Really, it's just Catholic churches. But yeah, so stuff like that. There was this one time, this was a few years ago, I went to this Catholic church because that's all there was in the area anyways. Not even church, it was, they had cafes because the Catholic church, they own cafes. Which that reminds me of the whole, don't make my father's house a merchant shop verse. But anyways, I went there, I went in the bathroom, and when I came out, some dude was threatening me, and he was giving me this look like he was about to kill me and stuff, and it just wasn't even that serious. And the thing is, a lot of these people, they just have so many hate spirits on them. And another situation where, like, I had this lady come up to me, and she was like, this is outside the Catholic church as well. And yeah, a lot of these situations are about me having to pee, unfortunately. In fact, that's what all of them really are about. So, I was at the door. This specific building wouldn't let me in, but there was another Catholic church down the street. This was actually when they were doing this ritual thing. And at this point in time, I was staying at like the youth shelter, and it was nearby. I had just found out about it. In fact, I found out about it because it was a girl who had just got kicked out her house literally like 4 days ago. She actually lived in another state, but due to the public transportation, it was so easy to get to this state that she would just go there to go to the shelters. And so, anyways, a lady came up to me after getting off her motorcycle, and she was like, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, "What are you doing here?" And she was like, "I'm coming here to strengthen my faith and get closer to the Lord and Mary, and you don't belong here." And honestly, I know people will be like, that's the sign to run. But, anywho, she said all that, told me I needed to leave. What else was it? Oh yeah, and then I walked down the street where they were having like this ceremony thing, and I used the bathroom. I did get a lot of questions. I was surprised they let me in. They really didn't want to, but they did. And the thing is, sometimes you have to like sit through the service to try to like make it seem like you didn't go to just use the bathroom when they already didn't want to let you in, or you had to like find a way in past the security and the people with guns and all that. So I was sitting in there, and some of the kids were crying, and I mean, it is scary though. Catholicism really is scary. It's definitely more scary than a voodoo cult. And I mean lower level voodoo, where they're just like taking out animals. Not that the Catholic Church doesn't have underground bases and underground parking decks, quote unquote, with underground tunnels, and they have the Baphomet statue under in the basement and all that stuff. But that's where they do their little rituals they do. Not that they don't also happen on like the regular altar stage, but anywho, the babies were crying, the kids were crying. One of them was like, "I'm scared and I want to leave," and then eventually her parents took her and left. And I mean, imagine how scary a service has to be for somebody to literally be crying the whole time, begging to leave. It's not even funny, but yeah. And then I like sat there for a few minutes until I could leave. But they were doing the little Pope ritual. But anywho, another situation. This is something that I ran into a lot. So like some grown man who was like I don't even think he was like high. I think he was just asleep. But he was asleep outside the church, and then the pastor came and hit him in the head with the door. And then I was walking by because I just came from the store, and I was about to take the food home, and then the dude was like, "Is this your friend? Tell him to move." And I hate when people do that. I hate when like some angry person, commonly like a racial and just like really discriminatory situation, will like see some random grown man and be like, "Is this your friend? Tell him to move or get him." And it's like, first of all, And I say it like this because he's not the first person to say something like that to me. And it's always in situations where I'm just walking by. It reminds me of this thing where people will be like, just because we're both gay doesn't mean we're dating. And I know a lot of people may not even get like how that's similar to that. But the thing is though, it's a lot of assumption around it too. It's just like, but I don't know. Because also something I've mentioned before is that like a lot of quote unquote white people don't believe I'm older than like 10 or 11. So in the West Coast where they're used to street kids, they feel like, oh, if this is a 10 or 11-year-old walking around by themselves, then they must be homeless. So you must know this guy. I guess that's a part of it, but I really don't know. But yeah, the pastor kept hitting the dude in the head with the door and everything. And then he would open the door, hit him in the head with it, close the door, hit him in the head with it again to get him to get up. And then I didn't even mention the fact that I was just walking. No, I think I did mention that. So yeah, I was just walking by, and then the pastor had a nerve to say, after letting multiple people in when I walked by, he had a nerve to say, oh, we're not open yet, and it's too early for you to come in, and you can't come in right now. First of all, I wasn't even thinking about coming in. I wasn't even looking in your direction. I was going down the road. But yeah. Another thing I heard about. I heard this story from this one homeless dude, and he was like, I went into church and asked for something to eat, and they told me to get out and that I needed to leave. And I was just like, the last place to go for food is a church. And something that Nubian Divine even mentioned is that when she goes to churches talking about the issue of homeless people and homeless kids, they tell her, oh, we send them to the Salvation Army. And the thing is, when you're under 18, you can't go to these organizations, although I do always let people know you could just lie about your age. Any organization that's really expecting you to have vital records and ID and all that, you might as well steer clear from them because they don't understand the issue of homelessness anyways. But of course, I mean, if you're like 7 and you don't have parents, obviously people are probably gonna not believe you're anything other than like 7. So it may not work then. And unfortunately, commonly, homeless youth, even ones that are 18 plus, will just have to like eat out of dumpsters because still with the programs that are put in place, they're not for kids really. They're for like, it's like nobody's in the business of housing kids, and you can't get a place under 18, at least not really legally. But especially nobody's in the business of housing people under 26, because you're actually a federal minor till 26. And also when it comes to homeless kids, they already know that most likely you've been homeless your whole life, such as foster care, getting kicked out, growing up homeless with parents but commonly without them. Whatever else happened, you've just been through a lot, and they commonly feel like by the time you are 18 or whatever, you're never going to be able to like get used to living indoors, and the different stuff that I've seen them say about homeless kids. Like I knew this one boy who was in a situation where a program was supposed to help him because he had been in foster care. Really, he was kidnapped. His parents were deported and he was kidnapped, and they didn't want to help him because quote unquote he's been homeless so long that we don't think he'll ever be able to adjust to a normal life. And it's really a messed up situation. But yeah, anyways, the lady was like, they sent him to the Salvation Army, or they tell me that they don't deal with that and stuff like that. But it's like, for certain situations in certain age groups, these organizations are even more safer. They just don't pertain to them. Like, anybody under 30, you're going to be an automatic target. Whether you're a boy or a girl. Because, like, what I always let people know is that when it comes to being a homeless kid or homeless youth, or a literal homeless child, because there are literal homeless children, they just get snatched up by police so quickly to, like, try to make it seem like they don't exist. Then when I say homeless children, I mean under 10. But like, when you go to these homeless organizations, like food banks and stuff like that, it lets all the perpetrators in the area that are and aren't homeless know that you're in the situation you're in and that you're in their area. So it's like if these religious organizations that claim that they're there to quote-unquote help people won't help these specific groups or really any of them, it's just another thing that makes things worse for people who don't qualify for certain things, if that even came out right. But yeah. And then I know people will be like, well, I mean, the kids should just go home or whatever in the world, which I'm not even going to go into that, but it's like, people will say they won't help somebody due to their age because they should be somewhere else, wherever that somewhere else is. But if you won't help somebody that's 14 or 15, you wouldn't help somebody that's 20. Most people don't really want to step in and play parent or hero, but especially they don't want to play parent. And this goes into another thing, which is really one of the situations that's really been on my mind while I've been talking about this. So there was this guy who had been homeless since 14 or before 14. He was a street kid, and eventually somebody came and said that they were going to quote unquote help him. And the dude, of course, essayed him, and that went obviously horribly left. So the dude who essayed him ended up getting sick, and nobody else wanted to take care of him. And so this guy called himself, quote unquote, forgiving the guy and going to help him and take care of him to show forgiveness and God's love. And this was on a live stream that was about deliverance. And one of the things that I think of in this situation is, for one, where were the religious organizations when you were homeless since 14? And of course, I could say the same thing about society in general, which I really see a lot of this stuff the same, to be honest. In fact, something that I commonly say that I really heard from somebody else, but it was just like a better summary of something I've been saying since I was like, I don't know, always really, but more so like 12, I would say. Everything is a cult. But that's another video. Anyways, so there's that. But anywho, the flipping around of the whole God's love thing, which this is done really often in cults, which is why, I mean, wasn't there literally one cult called the Love of God? Where like the dude had them like sitting on his lap butt naked or something, the usual satanic ritual abuse weird mess. And this is something that's really common that I notice very often when it comes to these religious organizations, especially Christianity. I don't really know too much about any other ones, but, well, when it comes to this at least, this like it's not even forgiveness, it's codependency and cognitive dissonance and even Stockholm syndrome. You have to forgive people, but trying to live off of people because like you don't believe you can do anything for yourself, that's really like accidentally manipulating yourself and them and using people. Not that I'm saying that's what was happening in this situation, but I just see this a lot. Because it's like, I mean, like I probably already said, you have to forgive people, but going to live with somebody that essayed you for years, it literally just isn't safe. It's literally like, it's not even safe. That is a horrible decision. People can say what they want to say, but that is a horrible decision. Somebody that hasn't said sorry, that has no remorse, and like, he even said something that reminds me of something I've heard someone say before, which the person I heard say this before, they're not even religious or anything. They're mostly an atheist, to be honest. But they were talking about their abusive parents who has had them homeless, or they were homeless anyway, since 17. Which technically, if you don't have a safe place to stay, you're hidden homeless regardless. And I can definitely say a lot of kids do grow up hidden homeless pretty much. I'd honestly say a lot of people are hidden homeless and may not even know it. Because, like, even if you don't have running water or things like that, the HVAC's broke, that's hidden homeless. But, yeah, so that's how her parents were. At least that's like the bare minimum. But one day she was like, my dad's so sorry for what he's done. He won't even talk to me or look at me or come see me, and he lives down the street, and he won't even say sorry. There's no such thing as being so sorry you won't say sorry, you won't even make eye contact with somebody or even help them in the situation that they're still in, that you put them in. That's like the very opposite of being sorry. And people could say it's guilt. And I mean, there could be some guilt there, but honestly, I kind of doubt it if you live down the street and your kid's been homeless for a few years. Or not even a few. Which, luckily, she's in a better situation now, but it's like due to the attachment issues from like the trauma, you end up in so many different situations over and over again, or at least commonly people do, with like dating and quote-unquote friendships and couch surfing, if you even have the ability to couch surf for a little while, which honestly, I really feel like even if you do have somebody you could couch surf with, it's not even worth it, because it only would last but for so long. Because eventually people are going to be like, well, I have to feed my kids, and like, your parents should be taking care of you, not me, and things like that happen. And I personally have never couch surfed or been in like that type of situation, but I hear about it all the time. I know people who have. But it's like, you can't convince yourself that somebody is sorry to make yourself feel better. Honestly, you really shouldn't even be worried about who's sorry about what, to be honest. Because it seems like the more you worry about whether somebody feels remorse or whether they're sorry or not, the more you lie to yourself. And I remember the person who was doing this specific live stream, they had been through something similar themselves, somewhat similar. So they didn't even say anything. They really just had a look on their face like, couldn't be me, I wouldn't do it. And I totally get it. And I understand why they wouldn't want to say anything, but it's like, it's not even safe. Like, somebody that's at that level of perversion and just addiction, they'll literally unalive somebody and probably have unalived multiple people. And I'm trying to like get around possible censorship, which this will probably get taken down anyways, maybe. Hopefully not. But it's like, that's just not even a safe situation to put yourself in at any age. Like, you can get assaulted at any age, any gender. And definitely certain people are more at risk, certain ages and certain genders, but it's like, perversion is at an all-time high. Like, dudes are assaulting other dudes, and same thing with women. So, another story I could add in, which is also really common, and it's like, due to the fact that religious organizations just push child abuse in general, this is just going to be like a really common issue. But I knew someone who told me about a situation that they saw when they were in church off and on at certain points in their life. So, at some church they went to, the pastor was always like uplifting their narc, quote-unquote, stepdad. And the stepdad didn't even believe in God for real. He would just go to church literally just to seek validation and make it seem like his wife's kids were bad and things like that. That's really a long story. And so the main thing that this person told me about were some kids in the church who were all being essayed by their dad, and everybody knew but nobody said anything and nobody cared. And of course, children, quote unquote, have no rights. Children are meant to be seen, not heard. The term made by Chomo Catholic priest. The whole what goes on in this house stays in this house, and quote unquote discipline stuff. So people just let it happen. And I wasn't told a lot about that, but just that like nobody ever did anything. The situation went on for years. All the kids were like depressed. They never said anything, never talked to anybody, always looked sad. The way those situations commonly go. Then another thing, just remember this. Something that was said by Allie Carter in one of her videos from some years ago. Because she's been making videos for some years, since like 2020, at least about SRA and stuff. And the video she made some years ago, she talked about how when her and other kids were being trafficked, sometimes their traffickers would like have them stand places when they would pimp them out, And one day, some church people had walked up to them and told them that they're sinners, they're bad, they shouldn't be quote-unquote prostituting, which there's no such thing as sex work anyways, but there is no such thing as a child prostitute. And the lady literally cursed them out and told them that they needed to stop doing what they were doing and get their life together and stop sinning. And they were literally being trafficked. In either way, there is no such thing as a child prostitute. And like, in the laws of Abraham, if I'm remembering right, it literally says, "Thou shalt not prostitute thy daughter." In fact, yeah, that wasn't the law, but in the laws of, I think it was Enoch. No. Yeah, there's laws of Abraham and the laws of Enoch, but the church never talks about those. They always talk about the laws of Moses, which some of that stuff really revolved around men and they would change the laws when certain things would happen, which is why people started having multiple wives. But anywho, in the laws of Enoch, I'm pretty sure it says, "Thou shalt not go into the youth and defile them," and different things like that. But Protestants removed half the books, and of course the pagan Roman Catholic Church also did. They're the ones who took authority over the Bible being written. Like, the Hebrews weren't even allowed to learn how to read or write, which we know what that parallels. But yeah, and as I talk about in my old videos, which are in a playlist on this channel but also on my old channel, the pagan Roman Catholic Church even banned Europeans from knowing how to read and learning how to read for hundreds of years. They wouldn't let them read the Bible. And they did this while removing half the books, well, more than half, because we have less than half the Bible. And of course, if anybody watches this till this point, they're going to just say, "You just have church hurt," and things like that. Honestly, I was lucky enough for my parents to not believe in God and for my family to be, well, I mean, they were atheistic enough. They definitely weren't Christians or religious, I'll say that. And they really didn't believe in God, but of course, as quote-unquote black people, I mean, you know, we say the things we say, like when something happens, we'll be like, well, I can say a lot of people do this, most people do this. It's really just like a societal thing, just like ingrained in people to be like, "Oh Lord," when things happen. But especially quote-unquote black people, we definitely do a lot of stuff like that, and like, because it's just like ingrained in us. But they still were atheists, so I was lucky enough to not have religious parents. And honestly, I feel like if my family was religious, I would be another person that's more likely to not believe in God. But then again, I don't really know, because I was always really interested in like quote unquote conspiracy type stuff and like the end times. But I've just always been very bothered by things that I've seen happen and see happen to other people. That's what's always really bothered me, is things that happen to other people. And another thing is, like, due to the fact that I was able to really start researching these things, somewhat at 6, more so at 7 plus. And while my parents and relatives hated it, I was able to learn these things on my own, not have somebody in my ear telling me what this means and what that supposedly means and flipping this around and flipping that around. I was able to read the Bible for myself, not have anybody else in my ear telling me what it means, and not have some religious organization telling me not to read it, because that happens pretty often too. Yeah, so I feel like I was lucky, and I noticed that like people who grow up in religious organizations are more likely to become atheistic or become Satanists, because like Aleister Crowley, he was Catholic, and there's a lot of stories like that. And Freemasonry is a branch of Catholicism, so really Aleister Crowley never left the Catholic Church. And he actually studied all religions, because of course all religion is the NWO, and they all worship the same fallen angels and Anunnaki. So of course he was able to hang with the Hindus and stuff. And with the stuff he was doing at 16, 15 years old, he reminds me of Nero. And he was definitely essayed by Catholic priests and whoever else. And one of the agendas of abuse is to make you hate God. And so like people go in these religious organizations, and then they go through the trauma they go through, and they start to hate God, or they get essayed or beat with rollers and the nuns forced them to kneel on peas in the boarding schools, frozen peas, which is also, that's really common for the school system branch of the Cash for Kids system, actually. But I'm not even going to go into that. Squatting in a cage for hours, and there's like cold water on the floor, different things like that. And they no longer want to pick up a Bible ever again, which commonly, especially in like situations this hardcore, they weren't allowed to pick up a Bible in the first place. Probably aren't even allowed to read. But yeah, I've even heard people say that one of the things that really started to make them hate religion and God is that they started reading the Bible and saw that none of the things that the pastor would tell them was in the Bible. But that should be the wake-up call. But unfortunately, for most people, that just makes them turn away from religion. And then, like, people pick up religious spirits, so that's why somebody will go from being in whatever religious organization to the alphabet community, because now they're in a new religion, because they just bounce around to different religions. So they went from worshiping Caesar Borgia, and now they're becoming Caesar Borgia. And like, people who grow up in religion, they're more likely to become transgender, they're more likely to fall into a lot of things. Drug addiction, hardcore drug addiction, join the satanic temple, different things like that.